Good morning everyone, Bob Martin with rcsub.com and the Nautilus Dry Docks, and a long overdue update on my Type VII project. In general, still toughing through the torpedoes. I've got some additional parts on order. So in the meantime, I've moved on to the part that I am really looking forward to, and that is painting. So if you remember how things looked a little while ago, everything was in gray primer. And this is where we are at right now, red primer. You can see that I've got some blotchy, splotchy brown sprayed all over that, and the reason for this is that I'm actually going to be attempting something that I've never tried before, and that is something called paint chipping. I'm what you might call an amateur hobbyist. So I'm going to be giving this a try. I'm looking forward to it. I've been reading up on the process, doing some research, and that's two different techniques that I'm going to be trying. One is salt chipping, and the other one is going to be more generalized paint chipping, utilizing a product called Micromask from Microscale Industries. And basically this is a water-based, almost like a rubber, and you paint it on with a paintbrush, dries, and then once it's all dry you just peel it off, leaving exposed what's underneath. So the theory behind this is kind of what you can see here. This is my conning tower. Again, red primer. And what I've done is I've taken rock salt, sprayed the model with just a water solution mixed with just a little bit of soap to help it spread out so it doesn't bead up on the model. And then I've crushed up the salt, and I've basically just crumbled it over the model. And the idea behind this is that it's going to create some realistic paint chipping. So you want to make sure that the model is not too dry when you do this, so that the salt doesn't just sit on the top. When the salt hits the water, it starts to melt, spreads out a little bit. You paint the model, and then basically you brush off the salt, leaving these sort of random places where the paint would have chipped off. And what I really love about this is when you get close, you can see that the edges of the paint are kind of lifted up and there's some bubbling going on, which looks really, really realistic. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm about to paint on my masking solution on some of the edges, longer areas, panel lines, and that sort of a thing. We'll see how this turns out, and you guys can see along with me if this was worth all the trouble or not. Okay, let's take a look at where we are. This is the main hull. It has been primed as it was before. Take a closer look here. You can see this blue rubber paint-on masking. That's what I showed you earlier. And you can also see the dusting of salt. Now a lot of this is going to blow off when I paint the hull, so it's not going to be quite as chipped as what you can probably see here right now. But next step this morning, I'm going to get some paint on there. If I have some time, I'm also going to highlight the panel lines with my airbrush, a little bit of dark gray. If we look over here, we've got the same sort of thing, but I've also put the paint on. So this is a flat gull gray by Testers, and you can see that the salt has been covered. Before I start chipping that off, though, I need to do the same thing. I need to highlight the panel lines with my airbrush. We'll get to that yet this morning and show you guys what it looks like. Alright, here we are after a few minutes of work with the airbrush. You can see that I've lightly highlighted all of the panel lines of the conning tower and the main cannon. Trick with this, just keep it subtle. And the thing is, if you overdo it at this point, you can always dust the model with the base coat again. I'm pretty happy with this. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is applying a filter, which is basically a wash, which will help even out a lot of those colors so it won't be so distinct. So we'll see how that turns out. Looking over here to the main hull, this is where we are at with that. So again, all of the panel lines have been highlighted. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this dry, and then theoretically, if I understand this process correctly, I'm going to scrub it down, get it nice and wet. Scrub it down with a soft bristle brush, and what that'll do is it'll knock off that first layer of paint, eat into the salt will dissolve, and it should theoretically leave that lovely rusty red color exposed where all of those salt flakes adhered to the hull. So we'll see how that turns out, and that will be in the next section. Alright, here we are after the base paint has been put on, and I have highlighted the panel lines with my airbrush. Getting up a little closer here, you can see obviously the two different colors, the hopefully subtle airbrushing that I did, and then you can see the granular sections here with the salt. Now the plan this morning is to soak the model down really good, take a brush, either a toothbrush or a very fine brass bristled brush, and try knock that paint off so that the water can attack the salt underneath. And I'll obviously do that also for the conning tower and the guns, and then I'll move on to a filter, or in this case a wash, that goes over the whole thing. Okay, here is the result of about half an hour, 45 minutes worth of scrubbing, and the tools I elected to use was a kind of a softer bristled brass brush, toothbrush, and my hobby knife. You can see that the chipping actually turned out fairly well. It looks fairly organic. I'm pretty happy with it. I think this will be something I'll kind of keep in my arsenal for the future. It did take some scrubbing to get the salt layer exposed. I think, if a model of this size, it might be a little bit more difficult, but I think for a smaller model, your best bet would be to actually try this when the paint is still a little bit tacky. Maybe use like a masking tape, try and pull up the salt while everything is still a little bit damp, because once that paint is fused, it actually makes a like a waterproof barrier to that, made it a little bit more labor intensive to get off. But at any rate, this turned out well. So this is sort of the base rust. That's where I think the rust would kind of collect a little bit. I'm going to supplement that with some pastel powders mixed with some flat clear, build that up, do some streaking and such, and that'll be next. So got the conning tower done, got the gun done, and I am going to move on to the main hull. Alright, she has been scrubbed, washed and dried. Didn't take as long as I thought it was going to. Overall, I'm okay with how it turned out. I like the places that ended up with lots of salt. What I didn't like was the fact that I didn't put enough salt on. So really what you end up with, and actually this side isn't too bad at all, I've got some good areas here, but then I've got some areas that really don't have any of that detail work that came from the salt chipping. And that's not a big deal. I mean, obviously I can just use more traditional methods, painting on the rust effects, but it would have been nice to have been able to have that rust kind of come through, because it has a 3D effect to it that is just almost impossible to duplicate with traditional paint. But this is sort of the overarching look that we got going on. Next step is going to be to spray the whole thing with a matte finish clear, and I'm going to wash the entire model in a dilute solution of black and rust, and that will hopefully highlight, you know, all of these really awesome panel lines and rivets and that sort of thing. And then overall it'll actually darken the model up too, which is something I want to happen, so it gets more of a weather beaten look to it. So that's where we're at right now. Stay tuned for more. Okay, here we are after the wash. Now this is the wash was a combination of grimy black and rust. It was diluted about 50-50, and basically the whole model was just drenched in it and allowed to settle, so you get this kind of like dirty, grimy finish, which is really what I was going for. This model is going to be fairly heavily used. I wanted it to look nice and weathered to give it lots of character. So that's been washed. I have cleared it again with semi-gloss clear lacquer, and that just locks in all of your previous work so that it doesn't get you know, washed out or and you can actually see an example of this where I didn't clear it thick enough, and the wash ran some of the light gray paint down into the dark gray. Not concerned at all, because that's a great place to put a little bit of rust streaking. We'll cover that all up. So I'm really happy with how it's turning out so far. Next step is going to be to apply some dirty rust a little bit more so. So I'm going to use some pastels. I'm going to mix it with some acrylic flat clear to make kind of a paste, and I'm going to smear it in where the rust would be, give it a little bit of dimension and texture, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay, I am in the middle of the process right now. I just wanted to show you what I got going on. So this is a mixture of acrylic matte and that chalk powder that I had showed you a little bit earlier, and you can see it just looks like mud. It's like a pasty solution, and this is sort of the finish that I'm ending up with, and I just want to show you how I apply it. So really random. Random is the key here. Just gonna kind of slather it on a little bit, and then the key is to just kind of wipe it down with your finger, and I'm gonna spread it in the cracks, and you just wipe kind of in a downward direction where it makes sense, like that. And that what that does is it fills the nooks and crannies and leaves the upper area kind of exposed. But what it actually does do as well on these like pure gray areas, when you wipe it downwards like this, it leaves like a dirty, rusty color. So anywhere that there is a you know, a recess or something that would be rusty, you know, that's where I'm going to hit with this rust. I'm just going to wipe at it. They got some panels in here. Anything above the water line, you want to make sure that you pull downward so that you get that streaking effect that goes on. And it looks sloppy, but you know, really that's nature. That's the way that rust kind of works. So that is the you know, the process. Some of these other areas, like the ballast outlets here, they got a little bit more. And the neat thing about this salt chipping that I really like is it's raised. Looks like bubbling paint. And if you just rub that brown paint or that solution over the top, it really looks like rust. I'm really happy with how that turned out. So I'm going to keep on going there, and we'll show you the finished result. Here's some details of the conning tower. You can see the seating positions. Those are all resin, painted with the same acrylics and rusts that I streaked the hull with. You can see the wooden slatting inside the conning tower. That's actually plastic styrene, and obviously went with that as opposed to wood, so that there would be no problem with it absorbing water, with this being an actual practical model. The last thing I want to show you is the periscope. I put some adhesive on here, and that's going to stop it from sliding any lower. As you can see, I've got a nice tall periscope there. And the reason for that is because when you're actually operating this boat as an RC model, to have a point of reference while it's submerged is a very good thing. So you can see that's up about 6 inches. Hopefully what will happen is when I bring this boat to periscope depth, periscope will be sticking up above the water, the model will be just below the water, and you'll be able to track its progress through that. Alright everyone, what you are looking at is what I am going to call the finished product in terms of the hull, in terms of the paint finish, final finishing on the cosmetic aspect of this model. As you can see, I've got the superstructure mounted on there. I've got the rigging in place. This is actually 1mm stretchy jewelry cord, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to have some tension on the wires there. It gives a little bit of extra play, a little bit of forgiveness when you're putting that together. Now obviously one of the challenges you know, with this RC model is that you still need to retain access to the interior of the hull, which makes it challenging in regard to the rigging. So if you take a look on the bow here, you can see this little fitting that I put together. And what that actually is a magnetic catch. So I can pull that apart and the rigging comes loose. And that means that the rigging can go with the conning tower for storage, and then access to the interior. And then to reconnect it, we simply snap it back together again. I think it works really, really slick. Hoping that everything stays together nicely when it's all packaged. The base magnets will stay with the base part of the hull, and the rigging will go with the conning tower. So use the same material there for the rope securing the plug for the main cannon. Really happy with how the hull finish turned out. I think it'll look really realistic on the water. So this is going to wrap up this chapter of the build log. Coming up next, and hopefully very, very soon, is going to be the trimming of the RC model. And that's basically where I establish the surfaced and submerged trim of the boat for operation. So hope to see you again soon. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.